So if you click this video, you probably know by now, Netflix made a documentary about me and my ex-teammates when we used to play for this company called And1. It's called The Rise and Fall of And1. Now, when you live through something, you have a lot of critique. You know, it's hard for people to document something that happened exactly the way it did. And when it means a lot to you, you want it to be exactly right. So in this video, I want to tell you what I think the doc got right and what the doc got wrong. I landed on 8 things that I want to talk about from the doc, but I also want to point out one part of this doc in particular I felt wasn't told truthfully at all. So I want to reveal that truth and set the record straight. Let's get into it. As we dive in, I want to give a shout out to Duke Tango. Duke Tango is the guy who actually named me the professor in 2003. He's the announcer of the And1 Mixtape Tour. I love this part they did with Duke introducing the players. When I first watched it, I got goosebumps. I thought the music was great and did an incredible job with these introductions. So right in the beginning, they were framing up what Streetball is and we're kind of like defining it for the audience. But I wanted to point out this one part where they had Shane say this Streetball has nothing to do with winning. Now in documentaries, a lot of times they'll take a line that somebody said about something else and they'll apply it to a different context to be able to tell a story. Almost 100% sure that's what happened right here, because I know Shane wouldn't say this Streetball has nothing to do with winning. He was probably saying it like from the fans' viewpoint, because a lot of people perceive Streetball when the And1 came out that it had nothing to do with winning, that it was all about the flashiness. But I want to set the record straight and just say the truth on that is that, you know, Streetball is just as much about winning as it is about entertaining. And it's something that was really challenging when I first got on the And1 Mixtape Tour, and I still deal with it today, is that you want to give the fans a show, but you also got to win, right? If you go all Showtime and you end up losing, then it like lacks respect. It's kind of like corny. But then if it's too much of a game and it doesn't entertain enough, then it kind of underdelivers also. So I would say the Streetball is just as much about winning as it is about being flashy. So in the beginning, it talks about the owners and sort of the And1 origins and how things came together. And I thought this was actually really interesting. You know, a lot of this stuff I didn't know. So it was cool to see like how everything came together to begin with. And there's a lot of mixed opinions on the owners, you know, and how things ended. It's a little controversial, so we're gonna get into that a little bit later. But I wanna start off by saying these guys did a great job. You know, the Trash Talk t-shirts were iconic and incredible on the design, really like witty jokes on those. The shoes were incredible. Some of the shoes that And1 came out with, I would say rivaled the hottest sneakers in the late 90s and early 2000s. So I did an incredible job on those. Like Tom Austin definitely did his thing with the design. You know, they appeared to be like some design geniuses.
How big were the t-shirts and the shoes in the culture, you know?
The Trash Talk t-shirts were huge in the culture. If you were like a cool hooper, or if you were like a hooper, you wore And1. I would say And1 actually set the tone for the basketball styles for the early 2000s in that baggy era. I definitely want to give them their props where it was due. So this Stephon Marbury part of the doc was super interesting to me.
This man is a can't miss.
The fact that Stephon Marbury broke his ankle wearing And1, and that's like their debut in the NBA. And what was so trippy is that if he didn't break his ankle wearing the And1s, they wouldn't have got the idea to go a different route for marketing outside of the NBA, because that's what they wanted to do. So it's almost like the And1 mixtapes, the And1 Mixtape Tour, the entire movement wouldn't have existed had Steph not broke his ankles in a pair of And1s. Steph was actually the first NBA player that And1 had signed. So they're trying to go the route of marketing A-list NBA players, and he was their gamble. And then it kind of went south, but it was actually for the good, because that's when they decided to go a different route and market with mixtapes and eventually the And1 Mixtape Tour. So I was blown away by that. You know, it's almost like the Professor, And1 mixtapes, Streetball as we know it today wouldn't be the same, and I definitely wouldn't exist without this moment. This next part of the doc I want to talk about is the players. I think all those players probably a little bit nervous watching it, right? Because you know, if a documentary airs on Netflix, you knew this was gonna get a lot of shine. So as I'm watching my backstory, I was just hoping that, you know, they did it justice and that it was accurate and it looked great. The backstories, I thought they were really dope, but it's almost like they were too short, right? When it starts out with Skip's backstory, a little bit of his journey in Streetball for sure, and then we know that he went on to be an NBA player for a lot of years and had a great career. Then getting some backstory about Shane and Maine, I thought was really cool. Shane and Maine, they got such like great personality, so it was cool that they kind of did their backstories together. I really enjoyed that. Hot Sauce alone, definitely a legend, right? He could have his own documentary that would be very, very interesting. We haven't really heard Hot Sauce speak since the And1 days, you know what I mean? And then I love the way they did my story. I was really appreciative of how much time they spent on it, and it was really portrayed in a good light. So I was really happy about that.
Was there anybody that they left out or didn't get enough shine that you were just like, I wish they would have shown X more?
So yeah, doing a doc on And1 is tough because in our prime, I think there was like 20 guys signed to the company, right? I saw at one point they mentioned Ali Mo, AKA Black Widow, rest in peace. I don't know if they mentioned Escalade, rest in peace, he died 2011. Other guys I would love to see get mentioned, you know, Headache, Flash, Sick With It. AO was kind of a main staple. AO not being in there sucked. So they couldn't include a lot of the guys in the documentary. I would have liked a lot of my other teammates to have been highlighted. All right, so I gotta address the basketball highlights, and this part bummed me out. I felt like the highlights that they chose to use in the doc weren't our best highlights. The reason you know, the mixtape tour and the And1 mixtapes were so incredible was because of how electric the basketball highlights were.
Professor looking at it. Oh, baby, this is the professor. He don't like that. Stop reaching on him. Professor, don't call that professor.
So I felt like the best basketball of the And1 mixtape tour and the And1 mixtapes wasn't necessarily in this documentary. These definitely weren't our best highlights. For example, one time Hot Sauce and I, we had a battle. He did this crazy crossover and it made me slip and I almost fell, but I touched the ground. They call it touching earth. And then I tried to get back up, but he shot a three from over here in the corner and it swished. A lot of people ran on the floor, they lifted him up. Mind you, I'm only 18, Hot Sauce was one of my idols, so I just got shook up.
I told Professor I was gonna drop him. It took like 8 games though, but I did it though.
And I looked at the opposing team coach, shout out to Mike Ellis. He looked at me and he was like, go right back at him. He's like, it's on you, go right back at him. So I come down the court not knowing what to do, and I think I just like blanked out and I did every move that I could possibly think of right at that moment, and they were going crazy. I was using some of Hot Sauce moves on him, ironically. So I did a whole bunch of moves, and then the last one I kind of did like a snatch back crossover, and he actually went for it. And then I drove the lane, and I think I even got pushed to the ground, but I threw it up and I didn't even get to see it, but it went in, and everybody went crazy. Like it's probably twice as loud as when he hit his shot. So same thing with Skip, Maine, Shane, Hot Sauce. We all had some incredible highlights that weren't in the doc. It didn't ruin the doc, but I do think that honestly it would have added tremendous value to have the best highlights. This next part of the doc about the Nike Freestyle commercial was a little bit weird, kind of like rubbed me wrong because I knew that the timeline was out of order. And it didn't really accurately reflect what was happening in the culture. And then it's like the Nike commercial posed a threat, but it wasn't really true. Those things actually happened when I was in high school, you know what I mean? Like, And1 put Streetball on the map and the movement was so crazy that it made other brands bring their own version of Streetball to the forefront. And that's what that Nike commercial was. But I think they told the story, maybe it made it more interesting. They made it feel like that Nike commercial posed a threat to And1. But the truth is that didn't threaten And1 at all. It was a cool commercial and that's where it ended. It never really posed a threat. Now, I didn't see the spreadsheets and the sales. Maybe it made a dent and maybe it just put some fear in them because Nike's so great at what they do. But one thing I do know is it came and went. Nobody was lifestyling Nike Streetball. You know what I mean? It was always And1. And the ESPN show came after that and took off and went crazy. And I don't think this had anything to do with deterring the success of And1. This next part is the truth I want to reveal. I feel like this part of the doc just wasn't told truthfully. And this has to do with the owners selling And1. Basically, this was spun as if the whole brand was going down and business was going down. So the owners had to sell the company.
When you create a monster, you gotta know how to tame a monster.
Why you ain't gonna answer? Cause I'm not. I don't give a ask the coach a question. Right, that's I don't disrespect you, man. I'm talking to you.
As long as I was at And1, there was always fights, but you know, you fight like brothers, like players have fights. There was tons of practices where we got so competitive that it kind of came down to a verbal altercation. There was the altercation with Half Man and Skip to My Lou. My view of this is that the brand just went up, and then the owners decided to sell it, and then things started going down and changing.
The owners just wanted to cash out. You know, they spent these years building the company to what it was, and I believe they just wanted to sell it and cash out, which isn't bad within itself, but it didn't seem quite just in this situation.
No notice.
The thing didn't tank because of egos and jealousy and going Hollywood and fights. That was there from day one, you know what I mean? One thing to note is that I really had no relationship with the owners. We knew Seth Berger because he would play ball with us at training camp before the summer tours. And he always seemed cool, but I didn't really know him like that. And then like with the other owners, I don't even know if I ever met them. Maybe I did shake their hand. It's fair to say I probably shook their hand at some point. You know what I mean? Things were moving a million miles an hour, so I didn't even get the names of the owners. So I just think that whole narrative of how the players took the whole thing down and the owners had to sell it, I just feel like for a fact that's not true. The owners sold it because they weren't having fun, like Tom Austin said. The shoes weren't made in quality. It got made in different factories, right? So the designs and the shoes went down, but the market never pushed it away. It has high appeal even today. It got sold out, it got into the hands of people who didn't know much about basketball, and then it plummeted from there, but that was their fault, not putting as much money into marketing and not doing things the same way the original owners did. Which brings us to the final point, is the controversial buyout of the company. It was interesting that I got the news that the company had just been bought out the same exact time I was given a copy of us on the cover of Sports Illustrated. And1 was literally the biggest thing in sports at that time. You know, going back to the last point, if business was going so far down that they had to sell it, well, why were we on the cover of Sports Illustrated the very moment we were delivered the news that the company had been bought out? When I went back and read about the buyout, it actually said that it was sold for an undisclosed amount. But I know in the final years leading up to that, they had profited over $100 million, and I think one year over a couple $100 million. You can only imagine what that number was that they sold and split, you know, between the owners. But
And the players saw none of that?
and the players, you know, the original OGs who started it, saw none of that. I felt like the doc did a good job of covering everybody's viewpoint about the buyout. The owners had their viewpoint. Right, you had the players' viewpoint, which some of them had separate viewpoints. My take on it is that I feel like it didn't seem like it was all the way morally just, but it birthed my whole career. You know what I mean? I feel like I was blessed just to be a part of the And1 mixtape tour, so I don't necessarily feel like I'm owed money, but it does feel like the original guys, giving them a thank you would be the option. But then also, nobody was legally screwed over legally. I do understand my OG teammates feeling slighted. I don't know what dollar amount would have satisfied the players, if any. One of the owners even noted, you know, that he wished they would have gave him maybe some equity. So it's kind of hard to say what the morally correct outcome should have been. Even just a few months ago, I was actually here with Dr. J. He told me that he had just watched the And1 Netflix doc, and he said, man, I saw that, he said, and I was so sad, man. I was so sad. And in a way, I'm like, dang, like, it really was sad, but also like, I'm bummed that was his takeaway. It was incredible. It was on top for a bunch of years. It influenced basketball as a whole. It even had an effect on the way the NBA is played now. You would wish that it was more of a ride off into the sunset ending, and to where we could say, hey man, that was an incredible time, and that's where it ended. But you know, this is how it was. Overall, I want to say that I love this doc. Big shout out to the director, Kevin, and the producers at Netflix and everybody who was involved in putting this together. I feel like it was well done. It was the fullest version of the story that's ever been told, and I'm really humbled that I got to be a part of something that went out to that many people. Definitely something to be proud of. And of course I had my critiques, you know what I mean? I lived it. This was as good a job as anybody could have done documenting the whole And1 movement.